guys, Nathan with Duck River Honey. I get a lot of questions about hive stands, so I want to take a minute and talk about hive stands. And to begin this discussion, I want to talk about where you're going to put your hives and some considerations for that. Now, when I started beekeeping, I had my hives in a fence row that's dead space, unused space around that fence, and sort of under a tree line, so they got midday shade, and the bees loved it there. They really did. They did very well right there. The problem that I had was twofold. Number one, the midday shade meant that I had more small hive beetle problems. That's not a huge issue. I can deal with that. But number two, that field had to be maintained. I had to mow it, and I've got a tractor without a cab, so I'd be buzzing through there mowing in July or August during the dearth, and the bees did not like me going by those hives. And I mean 20 yards away, they still didn't like me going by those hives with that big machine. So they zapped me a few times. And I decided, okay, if I'm going to grow this operation, I probably need to put some thought into this. And what I came up with was moving my hives to right in front of this old cow pond. This is dead space. It's not used for anything. We don't cut hay off of it. We don't bush hog next to this. We don't mow it. And the water area never has to be mowed. And their flight path, they've got a clear flight path out here that I never have to maintain. So this made a lot of sense for me. I went ahead and stocked the pond with bluegill. I figured I'm going to have a constant supply of dead bees hitting the water, because the bees will take the dead and dying out and drop them. So the bees feed the bluegill, and I can use the bluegill to let my kids catch some fish, or use them for bait for catfish or something. So consider the dearth and angry bees at certain times of year when you locate your hives. You're going to have a block of ground in front of the hives that the bees just don't want you in if there's a dearth, if there's nothing blooming. So put some thought into that. Now, as hive stands themselves go, I went from simple to complex to really complex to less complex to simple. And I don't suggest that you do that. I'll tell you this story. When I got started beekeeping, I had some swarms and packages, and it was just going to be a hobby. Now, I have since outgrown the hobby level, and I'm knocking on the doors of being a sideliner. But it was going to be a hobby when I got started, and I just set my hives up on concrete blocks and called it good. But since I had swarms and packages, I was feeding a lot of sugar syrup. And I was using hive top feeders on top of the hive to do that. And that meant that the bees did not have access to patrol that area. And that allowed carpenter ants to get in there. And I mean thousands of carpenter ants. Carpenter ants are the big black ants, and they were a real nuisance. I would have hundreds or 1,000 dead, drowned ants in my hive top feeder every time I got in there to do anything with my hives. And it was just a real nuisance. So I decided that I could defeat these ants. I could build a hive stand that would be ant proof. So that's what I've got here. I've got 4x4x12s, and they are 16 inches apart, and I've built angle iron supports for them. And the way that the feet work here is I've got a large carriage bolt. I've got a nut welded onto this angle iron and a hole drilled so that the foot goes all the way through the angle iron, and the nut in there allows me to level this thing. So this, I can screw in or screw out, lengthen or shorten it, and that levels it. But there's another piece right here that I'll show you a close-up of. This cup is a grease cup. So I can turn this thing over and put high temperature grease inside this cup. Now the reason you use high temperature grease is so it doesn't melt and drip on on a hot day. So in theory, the ant will come up this foot, hit the grease, and can't go past it because they'll get stuck in the grease and die. And in theory, that breaks the connection of the hive to the ground and would prevent ants from getting in it. I say in theory because reality proved to be a little different. I had so many great big carpenter ants getting in my hives that the entire colony was used to getting in my hives. So what they did is they just sent soldiers up to die like a zombie apocalypse and used the bodies of their dead sisters to form a bridge over that grease and went right into my hives. It did not solve the problem. So we moved to phase 2. I decided to put oil cups on these feet. Now these need to be pretty durable because that carriage bolt could go through just thin plastic. So I used PVC end caps. I think it was about a 2-inch. I poured vegetable oil in them. So the ant would have to come up, cross that vegetable oil, crawl up the leg, cross the grease cup to be able to get to my hive. And that did work until it rained. Oil floats on water, so the water displaced the oil, and then a sunny day came along and all the water dried up and my oil cups were dry and the ants were right back in my hives. So phase 3 got to the design phase but not the implementation. I was actually going to take a bigger PVC end cap that was probably, say, a 4-inch or something like that, and drill a hole in the center of it, drill it and tap it so that I could thread that up onto this foot and it would be a rain shield to go over the oil cup. I never got to that because I found a simpler solution, which was stop using hive top feeders. I stopped using hive top feeders and went to these frame cap and ladder feeders. This is a Man Lake Pro feeder, but all the bee houses will have a version of this. I know Mother Lode, I think they're out of California. They've got a version that's a little different, but these are not hard to find. This is a frame feeder, so this one is a medium double frame. It'll hold 1 gallon. It's got this ladder in here and a cap that prevents drowning, but this sits internal to the hive, so it eliminated my ant problems completely because the bees were doing the work of keeping the ants out of my hives at that point. I didn't have to help the bees, I just need to let the bees do their job. That's what I found. That's a lesson in beekeeping. If you let the bees do the work for you, life gets a lot easier. It takes some smarts to be able to do that though, it really does, and old beekeepers, they've got some wisdom on that. So the second iteration of my hive stands were similar to this, but not nearly as complicated. This took a lot of welding, it took a lot of fab, and I enjoy tinkering. And you know, at the time, this was going to be a hobby, so I didn't mind it. It was a fun project, and it does work. And I think I could make it work really well, but it's not worth the time and effort when I can just eliminate the problem I was trying to fix much simpler. So the second iteration of this, I still used 4x4s by 12s, but I just eliminated this. I set them at 16 inches, but put a 2x4 across them to keep them a set distance, and then supported them with concrete block. Now the problem with the concrete block is I had to level it, and I'm using roofing metal as a weed barrier, and leveling that the block on the roofing metal got to be a bit of a challenge. But once it is leveled, it works really well. And talking about leveling, these don't have to be perfectly level. You want a little bit of pitch forward, you don't want them too much off left to right, but they don't have to be perfect. And here's a quick tip for you. If your hive rocks just a little bit, get a door shim and put under the low corner, and that'll solve your rock. So I actually shot some video a few days ago right after a big windstorm about this second iteration of my hive stands, and I'll show you that now. We had a severe thunderstorm last night, and I'm getting around to my yards this morning to check for trees down, trees on hives, lids blown off, and all that stuff. You really want to do that, especially this time of year, because I'm in the hive so much that those propless seals are not as strong as they are in winter. And the hives are taller this time of year. So I got to my home yard after going to my other one, and I've got a lot of lids off. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Fortunately, these hives should be okay. Looks like the inner covers stayed put on all of them. And man, I had bricks on every one of them. I may have to go back to the half blocks for these spring storms. That's something. That's really something. I write notes on the tops of the lids. So with 4 of my 5 lids off of this row, I don't know that I'm gonna get the right notes back on the right hive, but I'll try to figure it out. So this is the lid that's furthest away. That's something, man. So the way I've got these hive stands set up is on 4x4s, and the 4x4s are setting on concrete block, and I had to level the block because they're on top of metal. And that was a little wobbly when I got them put in, and I was worried in spring specifically, we get these high wind events, and we have tall hives at that time. So I was worried about catching wind from the front or the back directly, and it just tipping the entire hive stand over. I've seen that happen on a Facebook group to another beekeeper, and I was really concerned about that with this system specifically. So you can see what I did is I took a 6-foot T-post, metal fence post, I cut it in half, so these are 3 feet long. I drove those into the ground and then took a 2-hole strap, a couple of those, and basically just bolted the end of my hive stand to these T-posts. So what staking these hive stands to the ground means is the hive stand itself can't tip over. So I can't lose 5 hives at once. Each hive would have to tip over individually for that to happen. It can't just, the entire hive stand can't go over at once, which would be catastrophic. Now, the hives can still tip over, and I've actually thought about putting a hurricane bracket or something and actually screwing the bottom board down to the hive stand, down to that 4x4 front and back. And at that point, you would actually have to break the boxes apart because the bottom board couldn't go with it. So I've not gone to that trouble yet, and I don't know that it's necessary, but that's something that would be the next step. And it's probably as much as I would ever do on these. To show you the third iteration of hive stands, we're going to go over to my new bee yard, which I'm setting up on someone else's property. So you can see here what I was talking about, my hive stands devolving to simplicity. I started out with adjustable hive stands with ant baffles and all this, and then went to something else that I had to level, and had to stake it down to the ground to keep them from flipping, and you know, those work great, but I've devolved into simplicity here. All I've got here is 8" by 8" by 16" concrete blocks and 30-pound felt paper. A roll of 30-pound felt paper is about $20, and these blocks are $1.50 a piece. So for a yard of 20 hives, I'm gonna have about 80 bucks invested in the hive stands. That's very, very good. The felt paper is here for nothing but a weed barrier, and also hopefully to catch small hive beetle larvae if they exit the hive. Hopefully this will help to break that life cycle. But mostly it's the weed barrier issue. I don't want to weed eat in front of hives all the time, so it's really nice to have something under them. What I really like about these blocks, besides the cost, you know, it's $3 per hive basically, is they're almost indestructible. These are not going to rot. They're not going to get eaten by termites or carpenter ants or carpenter bees. I don't have to paint them. They're just here, and they'll be here for 50 years. What I don't like about them, there's a tick on this block right here. I don't like ticks. So what I don't like about the blocks is getting them leveled. I've got to level them side to side, front and back, and then I want them pitched a little bit forward, but not a ton. So what I found, the easy way to do that is if I've got a lot of slope between the two blocks, I'll use the garden hoe to take down the high side. And then I've got this 8" by 8" tamper and 8" block, 8 by 16 block. So that works great to make a good level flat spot to put this block so that they don't tip back and forth. They don't wiggle hardly at all. Now when I put the bottom boards on here, there can still be some tip to them. So I just use door shims under whichever side I need to get it to level out how I want it. And that goes down quick. It works great. I really do like this system. So guys, I hope this is helpful for you. Whatever you're looking for in your hive stands, just design them with that in mind. If it's in your backyard and you want it to look really nice, well, make it look really nice, you know. I would recommend weed barriers. You don't want to weed eat around your hives all the time, especially in the middle of summer. The hives just don't like that. Tipping them a little forward to get rain and snow to run off is a good thing. Trying to ant-proof your hive stands, in my experience, it was a waste of time, but I also don't live in an area with Argentine ants or anything like that. So I found what works for me is to just, when I'm feeding hives, to make sure I use feeders that the bees can protect instead of using hive top feeders. So that's all I'm doing for ants now. On most things, especially in beekeeping, I try to start out simple and then work my way up the complexity ladder when I've proven to myself that complexity or extra steps are needed. In this, I started out the wrong way. I started out too complex, too much time, too much money, and you know, something else works, in my opinion, just as good or better and is going to be more durable and is a lot cheaper. So that's why I've gone to this system. You know, this is an out yard, it's not my property, so if I ever have to pull out of here for whatever reason, property sales or whatever, even if I have to leave all this stuff here in a hurry, it won't bother me. I'm not out much. So I like all those things about this system. Hope this is helpful, guys. I'll see you on the next one.